So you can see I've got my little setup. I've got a little backing block on here to guide my, make it square and keep it stable. 7mm drill, brad point. You don't want to use a standard twist drill because it will just kind of squirm all over the place. And I've got a little stop block here to kind of help blow out at the back. So I'm just going to lower this down, make sure I've got the drill where I want it, and I'll just keep it down. And that should be a nice hole there, all the way through. You can see it's hit all the right spaces. So this is a nice straight hole along there now, and to clear out this kind of piece here, all you'd need to do is to take a chisel and kind of chop out the rest of that. So the next thing we need to do is to drill out this mortise here for the arm, and that will be done using a similar arrangement, using a Forstner bit for the right diameter. And I'll be doing it on the drill press again, but you can do it by hand obviously. And you know, it's more of the same process, just line it up, drill, and then I'll once I've done that, I'll come back and show you how to, well, give you some tips on how to square off this mortise here and clean out this wedge mortise. Okay, so here I've got the block. You can see I've drilled the Forstner hole, and now I've got to chop out these wedge mortise, this wedge mortise here, and this arm mortise. You can see here I've also drilled a diagonal hole because I had some space left over, so that was quite lucky, and I managed to be able to drill a hole through. It's not perfect, so you know, I'll have to clean that up. But some tips on actually chopping the mortises here. So the first thing is this arm mortise. This bottom radius here is just going to be the same as for your Forstner bit, and you want to chop out this top kind of area here so it's square all the way through. And before you start, you know, go chopping crazy, you want to get a wide chisel and kind of reference it along the scribe line that you had and make a shallow kind of cut along that line to give you a guide. I used a wide chisel in this, but it's just to show you. And then you want to get a slightly narrower chisel and do the same and kind of make a guideline along here. But you don't want to go below the halfway point, obviously, because you don't want to cut below there. So kind of chop out this kind of guide line area here, and that will help you register your chisel so you get a nice steady kind of, you know, placement of the chisel. You can do it on the back as well when you're chopping the other way, because you chop in halfway this way, chop in halfway there, and meet in the middle, otherwise you can blow out the wood. So it's just simple of kind of, you know, chopping out piece by piece with a chisel and a hammer. You don't want to go too much, too deep in one go. And of course you want to make sure your chisels are sharp, because you'll probably do a lot of damage otherwise if you don't have a sharp chisel. So you just keep doing that and just carefully edge up to these lines, and you should get a nice kind of clean square face. Now if you don't trust yourself with a chisel, what you can do is you get a square block of wood and you can kind of clamp it to the face along that line and use that to register your chisel on, so you get a nice square face. That will work well, and that will help when you're doing the final kind of pairing, just clamping that, and you can pair carefully by hand using that as a guide block to keep your chisel nice and 90 degrees to the face. So that's for the arm mortise. Now for this wedge mortise, it's a little bit more involved. You can do the same technique again of chopping around the guideline here to deepen the mark, so you have a nice registering surface. And the rest is kind of like the same basically. First you want to chop vertically down, clean up these corners here for this vertical face. Be careful when you come out here, because you, if you go too crazy, you could blow out the insides. It doesn't really matter, but you know, try to keep things clean. Now, this sloping face is probably going to be the problem. You're just going to have to eyeball that and try to pare that down. You shouldn't have much material to go if you've drilled, but if you didn't drill that out, you can kind of, you know, chop down very slowly. Don't use a chisel this wide obviously, but you can sight down and kind of chop at a steeper, or not steeper, a shallower angle than your final line, and just kind of edge up to get to your final angle. That prevents you from kind of going too far and just digging in. There's not really much kind of I can help you with there, except you just kind of take it slowly. Make sure your chisel is really sharp, because this is end grain you're cutting, and as long as you go slow, you shouldn't really kind of have too much problems, because the chisel you'll be using for this is probably quite narrow, like 1/4 inch or something, so you don't need much force to push. And if you don't already, get some sort of a vise or a clamp to hold this down to your surface so it doesn't wobble and you don't have any kind of problems trying to keep the piece kind of stable. That will help a lot in your chopping. But you know, just keep working at it and you'll eventually get there. It doesn't have to be perfect, as I said, because no one's going to see it, and you only need a rough kind of angle here anyway for the wedge to work. So, you know, if you don't make this angle perfect, or if it's not straight or whatever, you know, don't stress about it. It will work in the end, and you can improve on your second marking gauge. So I'm just going to chop out these mortises, and I might come back and give you a kind of in progress shot, depending on how busy I am. But you know, I'll chop these out and come back to you. So I finished chopping out the mortise for the arm here and the wedge, and so the next thing we need to do, actually before we get to the next thing, some tips for actually keeping the blowout to a minimum inside here is, well, I said in the earlier video, or in the earlier section, you should drill out the wedge mortise here first, and then drill out this arm mortise. But before you drill out this arm kind of hole here, you should drill out the wedge and actually finish chopping out the wedge before you drill for this hole here. That's because you can then get this square and everything and finished and clean without any blowout. Drill this, and then you can plane down a piece of kind of wood and slide it in here so it fits nice and snug, and then chop out the square end here, so you have something to bear against, so you won't kind of blow out the insides. Doing it that way is probably the best way to do it, so ignore what I said in the previous part. So I've done the chopping anyway, and I've got my arm, and if your arm isn't the right size for your kind of hole you just made, plane it down or something, and get it so that it just fits in the top here, so it's nice and tight. If it's oversized a little bit, it doesn't really matter, because you can just plane it down a little bit to kind of fine tune it, but you don't want it too loose, so try to get that roughly right. And the next thing we need to do is to radius the arm so it fits the radius here, and you do that by just taking a block plane and kind of planing it down, but you can mark it by sticking the arm in the end here and kind of lining it up and holding it there, taking a pencil or something and just marking the radius on the arm. So do that on both ends, and once you've done that, you just get a block plane and kind of plane down to those marks, basically, just like so. There's nothing really special about this, it's just kind of planing, and you just keep testing, test fitting, so that you don't go too far. and that's it really. So I'm just going to continue doing that until I get the right radius, and then we can move on to actually chopping out and creating the sort of mortise for the blade in here, and actually making the blade and stuff as well. So I'll finish radiusing the arm and come back. Okay, so this is the finished arm in the body here, and this is the kind of fit you're sort of looking for. You know, not too stiff, but not too loose. It doesn't matter if it's a little loose, because as the wedge goes in and tightens down, it should be all nice and tight. And the important thing is to get this radius as close as you can. So the next thing we need to do is to make the blade. Now the blade width should be about 1/3 of the kind of width of your arm stock here. I'm using a jigsaw blade, so all I'll do is I cut a chunk off that, and I'll just file off the teeth, and that'll be just about right, as you can see. But you don't want it too thick, obviously, otherwise you won't have room for the screws to hold on the plate, the end kind of plate. So don't go too wide on your blade. I've got a 20mm wide arm here, and the jigsaw blade with no teeth is about right. But if you've got a narrower arm, then you'll want to file your piece of metal down a bit narrower. And you want the length of the blade to be long enough, obviously, to kind of cover the whole arm here. But you also want some extra here so that you can adjust it as well. And also when you sharpen it, you'll have some blade left over to actually sharpen. So I'm just going to kind of file away these teeth. Just use a standard metal file and just work away at the teeth. It should go pretty quickly if you're using high carbon steel. High speed steel, you'll probably need some sort of a grinding arrangement. But this should go pretty quick with a coarse metal file. And you just keep doing that, and you shape it so that, well, you obviously cut all the teeth off, and then you just kind of clean up the ends, and well, I guess I'll show you later after I've done this, but for the kind of blade end, you want to make a sort of a bevel, obviously, so I'll show you that once I get all the teeth cleaned off. So here is my blade, and you can see I've actually put a bevel on the end here. Now, I don't know if you can actually tell in the video, but this is a kind of a spear point, but you can see it's not even, so it's more beveled on this end than here. And the reason is because having a spear point will give you extra support on your tip. This edge here is going to be the cutting edge, so you'll be kind of pulling along here and cutting wood like that. And this back bevel kind of here, this provides support, so the tip won't get stuck in the wood and chip and break off. This is kind of how the Japanese do their shape their marking points and their knives. So I've done the same. Obviously, you can imagine if you didn't have this bevel, you'd just have this sharp angle here, a knife point, and that's liable to get stuck. And if you do any kind of, you know, backwards, forwards, twisting or anything like that, then that's just going to snap off. So if you're going to do a knife edge like this, it'd be nice to have an extra bevel on the back. Obviously, you don't need a point. You can shape this into a curve if you like, or whatever shape you want. You can actually have it into a double spear point, like an even point, so you can push and pull. So it's fully up to you, but I've chose to go into this orientation. Now, it's kind of rough, so I'll finish shaping this on the sharpening stones, and I'll obviously lap the back, etc. But that's the blade done. The next thing to do is to mark out the mortise on your arm to accept the blade. So you just, basically lay the blade on the middle of your arm, mark out the width, and then mark out the depth you want to go. So the depth you want to go is basically the depth of the blade plus maybe an extra millimetre or so. You don't want it really flush because you might not get it quite perfect, and then when you put your plate on, your blade mightn't be able to fit in. So give it a little bit of extra clearance, but not too much. So that's just simple, job of marking out, and then you can just saw two curves along your lines on your end grain down to the depth that you marked, and then just chisel out the waste, and that will be your mortise finished. I'll go and do that and come back, and then we'll get on to the next job, which is to create the end kind of cap plate for the threaded thumb screw.